Imposter syndrome is something that we've all dealt with and will continue to deal with, but it can be a really healthy thing.
Welcome to the Marketing Mentor podcast, brought to you by RedPandas Digital. My name's Tasha and I'm joined here with Linda. In today's episode, we're talking about imposter syndrome. So it's estimated around 70% of us have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in time. And what's more, it can also be argued that you can't have imposter syndrome without being successful. What is it? Who might be experiencing it? And how it actually can be a really healthy thing. Linda, so what I want to kind of kick off with is a bit of a definition of imposter syndrome. So, for me personally, I would say imposter syndrome is that feeling of, am I good enough for this? Can I actually do this? Is someone going to realize that I'm not actually good enough to do this? What do you think?
I've had those thoughts before. It's when you start to have those self-doubting questions in your mind. And I feel like imposter syndrome it's when you're more than capable of doing the work, right? But you still have that self-doubt. And like you said, you have those questions in your mind where it's like, am I going to get caught out soon?
Yeah, 100%.
Are people going to know that I'm not capable when in reality you are more than capable?
Exactly. And I kid you not, 100% imposter syndrome. Even just doing this podcast today, it's like, have I got enough experience or credibility to actually be doing this? But it's feeling really good. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I know that I experience it not just right now, but in all aspects of my professional life and even in my personal life. You kind of stop yourself in a moment and think, how much longer until someone's going to realize I don't know what I'm doing? But you actually do, and you are achieving those things based off of your own, experiences and mistakes you've made in the past, and how far you've come from learning from those mistakes.
I feel like you touched on something earlier where you mentioned that, like in the definition, that imposter syndrome is something that we all have to go through to be successful. And tell me one person that's been successful and not had imposter syndrome. Yeah. Maybe they haven't spoken about it, but I feel like it's a topic now that is becoming more and more aware. Yeah. Not only on the female front, but also on the male front as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess we know and studies show that the prevalence of imposter syndrome amongst women is much more prevalent or spoken about as opposed to men because of women's self-confidence, general self-confidence. And I guess if you ask men, right, and you ask them about what contributed to their success, studies have shown that they'll most likely attribute internal skill sets, right, to their intelligence and their internal skills and abilities. Whereas when you ask women the same question, they're more likely to attribute external things.
Externally, yeah.
Yeah. Like so they'll say,
a job I was given.
Yeah, I got lucky.
Yeah, exactly.
I studied really hard.
Yeah, true. And it's so funny you saying it because when I think about some of my successes, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's because I've put my head down and I've put in those 20 hours worth of study to get all those certifications or whatever it might be. If anyone knows me or what I do in, my role at RedPandas is like I'm the HubSpot certified trainer, and like part of getting there was smashing out all those certifications. And I think a little bit of maybe more than a little bit, but a big piece of me striving so hard to get all those certs was imposter syndrome, going, well, I've got my team going on about how I'm the most accredited HubSpot person in Australia. Well, crap, I better keep up with that and get all those certs and smash out all those hours and feel like in a way I'm constantly chasing my tail to make sure that I'm indeed that person and, not feeling like, oh, what if someone pulls me up? But then I catch myself whilst I'm delivering onboardings or trainings and I go, whoa, Tash, you actually know a lot. And you've got this team of, 20 salespeople that you're training and they're listening to every word you say, writing down notes, and you're thinking, there's the validation that I need. So I think it's, imposter syndrome, like you mentioned it, about what I said, that you can't be successful without it. I think with it keeps you in a way humble, going, okay, I know I need to work hard to be the best. It's not just going to happen, but I have to find that balance between it being crippling.
That's the thing. There's different levels of imposter syndrome, right? I feel like you're at a very aware, like let's call it level of imposter syndrome, where you know that you're feeling it the signs are there that, you're asking yourself certain questions, you're doubting your own confidence, but it's not crippling because you're able to be aware of what you're experiencing and therefore do things.
It's not to the point where I've got so much imposter syndrome that I can't even do my job.
Exactly, yeah. Because I've definitely felt it in the past. And to this day, if I, think hard enough, right, I definitely still experience it. But I remember in one of my previous jobs, so for those people that are listening, I am a consultant here at RedPandas, but in one of my previous jobs, I was in a very high-level strategic role. And I was the only marketing person at that time and didn't have a team really at the initial point. And for me, it was deeper. The imposter syndrome was deeper because I didn't really have anyone around me that was in my industry to help me, to validate me and to help me understand that my skill set in the industry is actually really high and don't doubt yourself and, be more confident. I didn't have that. So I guess in that particular role, it was definitely towards more of the crippling side.
Yeah. And leads you to thinking like, am I capable of doing this? Is this the right thing? And then I know since you've been here with us working, you're absolutely smashing it. So I think that imposter syndrome, like I was saying before, it's made you successful because it's made you hungry to want to know more and keep going. So you turned maybe a little bit of crippling imposter syndrome into a strength. And on that point, I kind of really want to, mention that we call it imposter syndrome and it almost has a connotation like it's this bad thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I've got a syndrome I've got to live with or fix or solve. But
everybody has it.
Everyone has it to a certain level, extent or degree. And maybe it's definitely not a negative thing. It can be, like we were saying. But it's just finding that balance between going, okay, I want to be the best HubSpot certified trainer in Sydney or Australia or in the world, whatever it might be. So what are the goals that I'm going to take to get there? And not let it cripple me and stop me from achieving the goal, but actually keep me humble and keep me working towards that goal. I think it's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, I think when I look back at that, that previous role where I felt it a lot and ultimately kind of led me to a decision where I wanted to move away from a role where I was just the marketer and move away from that responsibility, to be honest, because I needed to kind of self-reflect and have people around me to kind of lift me back up again. But it's crazy what hindsight can do, especially imposter syndrome. I guess at that point, it kind of ultimately led me to leave that job. But, you look back now in hindsight and I think to myself, now that I have, people around me in marketing and professionals and experts around me and I can see my skill set more objectively, I look back at it and I think, oh my God, like you had that. There were people in this job before you that were getting paid more than you and, all the inequalities that we still see in today, they were getting paid more than you, they were older than you, and you let those things kind of get in your head and really make you self-doubt yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And not realizing, I think it's again, like this balance of confidence, humbleness, and striving and willingness to learn that keeps us, I say managing and thriving with imposter syndrome because it's something that we don't have to solve. We don't have to figure out how to get rid of it, but how can we manage it enough that it's not crippling and then thrive with it so we continue to grow and become, the cliche best version of ourselves or the most, the best professional version of ourselves. So, there's a couple of tactical suggestions, we can share with listeners and with ourselves as well that can help us manage imposter syndrome and when we're feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed, like, holy crap, can I do this? Am I the right person for this? When are they going to find out I'm a fake? Sit down, have a look at your successes.
Yeah.
Where have they come from? How can you, what can you attribute to achieving
objectively look at them?
Objectively, exactly. And like you were saying before, look at, I guess, all the different channels or roads that have helped you get to those successes and realize that a lot of them are intrinsic to yourself as well from being a hard worker or a dedicated professional. Have you got any other tactical suggestions that we can use managing?
One that I really drew on and I kind of touched on it is just having people around you that you can talk to about how you're feeling. Like even saying it out loud and saying, I feel like I have imposter syndrome to a colleague of yours or maybe it's a mentor. I'd say someone like it makes the most sense to talk to someone about this that's in a similar professional field to you. That way when they validate you, it kind of means something to you. But having those people where you can have that chat with, firstly, when you say it out loud, you kind of almost sound ridiculous. Like your colleague is more than likely going to say to you, no, you don't. Like, but if you do and you voice that opinion with your colleagues, at least then you can kind of find a more objective view on imposter syndrome.
Yep.
When you're kind of feeling it yourself, it's very hard to go from subjective to objective because you're in that state and you have that low confidence in that moment. So sometimes it can be hard to kind of look at yourself without any emotion attached to it.
Yeah, 100%.
But by talking to your colleague and saying like, what do you really think about my skill set? Or how do you think I communicate? Or what do you think that I can do better? Having those positive conversations with people around you really helps you get out from the depths of imposter syndrome.
And feeling like, oh, can I do this? When are they going to figure out I can't do this? Am I the right person for this role? Like, it's almost like every 2 or 3 days you have those questions. I know personally pop up into my mind, and it's a reminder that, okay, yes, you can, but like you said, talk to your colleagues, your mentors, your peers, people that you're respected and they know what your capabilities are. And it's not to get that validation from someone else. I think it's important that we find
internally
validation within ourselves 100%, because then, at the end of the day, you need to be happy and confident in your own choices. But if you are, when I say suffering, I mean like if you're dealing with imposter syndrome and you find yourself asking those questions and trying to strive for perfection all the time, and I know this happens to a lot of us in this office, and on myself, is like not everything has to be perfect, not everything has to be brilliant. It just needs to be good enough, and it just needs to be done. And that's one way we can kind of go, okay, I'm getting this done, and I'm always getting better.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I think for my personality, I'm definitely like a perfectionist.
Yeah,
and I agree. I've had to get to that point where you just need it done. As opposed to everything being perfect, because that bottlenecks you.
Yeah, and it can be crippling, just like imposter syndrome itself can be crippling.
Yeah.
Trying to be a perfectionist or trying to get everything done, to a T can be crippling. And like the nature of an agency is we need to get stuff done and we need to get it done quickly sometimes. So it's like this syndrome affects us in so many different ways. Like I was saying before, in your professional life, I'm sure we could probably have a whole other podcast around imposter syndrome in our personal life, but we won't open that can of worms just yet. I think some key takeaways for anyone listening would be definitely look at your successes and, remember that you can look at them objectively, like Linda said, and where did they come from? How can you attribute those to them? And, take a moment to give yourself a pat on the back and say,
exactly.
like I did this. This is, there's this thing that, Moby says, our leader, if anyone listening is not sure who that is, and he's like, dig into your cookie jar and like take that and be like, yeah, I did this. Like, this is awesome. Good on me. And even if you have to say that inside, I say it out loud sometimes, or I give myself a pat on the back, or even, ooh, go Tasha, because I'm kind of acknowledging like, yeah, I can do this. And you should give yourself the kudos when,
Yeah, you're so right. It's so easy to focus on the things that go wrong in the day. Like naturally, it's easy to kind of veer off in that space, but then actually taking the time to focus on what the wins were for the day.
Exactly.
It takes effort, but by doing that, you kind of, like you say, you're rewarding yourself.
Exactly.
And kind of keeping the imposter syndrome at bay to a degree.
100%. I love that. All right, well, that's it for time. The idea of this podcast is to answer your questions. So follow us personally on LinkedIn. That's Tasha Del Bianco, Linda D'Amico, and you can connect with us at RedPandas Digital. Send us your questions. We'd be super keen to answer them during the Marketing Mentor podcast.
Thanks, guys.